Everybody to Transport for the North Scrutiny Committee. Meeting today, Thursday the 9th of September. We're here in the Holiday Inn, and I must point out to everybody present that we are being filmed and broadcast. So perhaps you might remember what to do when the camera actually pans onto you. The camera, I believe, is just panning round, is a vague view at this point, or maybe even myself. Anyway, welcome, and we've got a packed agenda today, so I'm going to crack on. If I could just ask Gary for apologies for today, please.
Yeah, we've had apologies from Councillor Lamb and Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Does anybody know of any other apologies at all?
Councillor Craig, I'm substituting for Councillor Craig.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Could I have somebody, we have two sets of minutes to approve. Gary, do you want them approved as a joint item or two individual items? So could somebody propose? Okay.
Sorry, just in respect of item 6 for transparency, in respect of my partner's employment as a guard on Transpennine Express and a member of our RMT union.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, before the minutes are approved, you may want to take it afterwards. I'd like to, if you're willing, raise a couple of brief matters arising, one from each set of minutes. Is that acceptable? These are reports that were promised but are not, well, in one case, not on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay, so this is effectively matters arising. I'll take it as...
I'll be extremely brief, Chair. I should.
Well, let's approve the minutes and then we'll do the matters arising. If somebody could propose the minutes, please. Thank you, Councillor Fenton. Seconder, please. Thank you, Manisha. So that's the minutes approved. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the Scrutiny Committee Chair. And, matters arising. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Matters arising. I've been kicked appropriately and corrected.
Thank you. Well, in terms of 15th of April minutes, paragraph 6.6, colleague Councillor Fenton here suggested that communication of work on the, I think it was on the decarbonisation strategy, should be sent to the various scrutiny committees around the north of England. And I just would like an update on whether that happened, because I didn't spot it referred to in agenda. And in terms of the 7th of July, paragraph 5.5, number 4 in brackets, noted that a report on the government's national bus strategy, Bus Back Better, be requested for this meeting, the September meeting of the committee, but it's not on the agenda. So I'd like an update on where we are on both of those, please. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any comment to make on the minutes at all? Or even in support, or any other comments on the two items that Neil has presented just then? I can comment on both of them.
I'll briefly comment on both, if that's okay, Chair. So on the decarbonisation strategy, as members will know, that was agreed in draft form at the board at the end of March, and TFN has been running a formal statutory consultation that closed at the end of August. I do believe that we'll need to check and come back exactly how the communications to local authorities happened, but I do believe there was a specific communication around that. And we'll come back and confirm. But the fact that there's been a public a full statutory consultation, I hope sort of meets the intent of what was agreed.
It's on that, Chair. I'm not aware it was sent to my local authority. It might be wrong, but we look forward to hearing an update.
We'll confirm. Yeah. I believe, I think on the, I believe, Chair, on the Bus Back Better strategy, it was agreed that we would come back at a later meeting, given the amount on the agenda today.
I can corroborate both of those. I certainly know the consultation went to North Yorkshire County Council, but obviously I'm not present at all the others. But the statutory consultation did go out as well, and then I believe the Bus Back Better is coming to a later meeting. So thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Hughes. I'd like to move to item 4. If Councillor could take over, please.
Good morning, everyone, and sorry for late. So, any nominations we have?
I'll nominate Paul Haslam if he's willing to stand.
Anybody second?
Happy second.
Any more nominations? No? Job done so easily. Congratulations, Paul. Yeah. So back to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your trust in me. I hope it's that, but I will continue to do the best I can for this next year to manage these meetings and the workload. So I now need to appoint a majority vice chair and a minority party vice chair as well. I have at the moment one nominee for the majority vice chair, which is Manisha Kauslik, and I have a minority party vice chair nomination in the form of Councillor Neil Hughes. Are there any other nominations? Would anybody care to second that for me? Thank you, Councillor Salt, Councillor Parish. Congratulations, Vice Chairs. I'll try and be absent next year and give you some more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So we now come to the scrutiny review, which is where we're obviously reviewing the scrutiny process, and I would like to hand over to Manjeet Dhillon, who will take us through the papers that are in association with this item. Over to you, Manjeet.
Thank you, Chair. If I may start by just taking members through the salient points from the report that's before you today. So the report is following on from the report presented to your committee in July, when you were provided with information on the process for the start of the review of the scrutiny function. Committee was provided with information on scrutiny statutory requirements, also on the establishment of the principle of scrutiny first, which has been in operation since inception. So to start the consultation exercise, exercise was undertaken by way of a questionnaire which members will recall. Responses to this consultation were reported at the last committee. Members were also asked to consider the role of scrutiny panels at that time, which is provided for in the Constitution. So following on from the last meeting, the purpose of this report today is to provide an update on the progress of the scrutiny function review, to report to you on the further consultation responses on the role of scrutiny function, and to report on the consultation responses on holding of future scrutiny committee meetings and consultation calls. It's also to keep under review the need for the role of scrutiny panels as it was recommended by committee at the last meeting. The report also provides members on a recent audit report, information on the recent audit report on Transport for the North governance. So if I may just take you through the main parts of the report. So the first part is on the further consultation. As I stated, a further consultation was undertaken following the recommendations from the committee for the questionnaire to be recirculated to members of the committee. As you will see from the appendix, there were 4 further responses to the questionnaire. Appendix 1 to the report shows the responses, and the most recent ones are shown in red. And members will note that the responses are similar to the views expressed at the first consultation exercise. Now, turning to future meetings, at the last committee meeting, members requested additional questions be added to the questionnaire to seek their views on the holding of future meetings. These additional questions and responses are shown as questions 15 to 18 on the appendix. This actually ties in on the question of holding of future meetings in line with the legislative provisions which enabled virtual meetings which have come to an end on the 7th of May. This means that face-to-face meetings have been now reinstated. So as part of the governance report to be presented to the board on the 29th of September, the board will be asked to approve amendments to the procedure rules contained within the Constitution to enable members to join formal meetings using virtual means. This amendment will allow members to speak and contribute at meetings, although it would not allow members attending virtually to be counted as quorum, nor would it enable such members to participate in a vote if a vote is called for. If the board approves this amendment to the procedure rules, this choice will also be available to members of this committee in the future. I must add that this, of course, is subject to the required technology being in place and available at meeting venues. So with this in mind, and taking into account the members' views to the consultation questionnaire, members are invited to consider the options for future meetings, and these options are set out at paragraph 4.6 of your report. Now, turning to scrutiny panels, which is also an item in the report, as recommended by members at the last meeting, the role of scrutiny panels has been included as a standing item, although members, you will recall members, you were generally satisfied with the current scrutiny process that's in place. Finally, the final part of the report deals with the governance audit report. This is, and members are asked to note and consider the recommendation of the annual audit on Transport for the North governance. The audit report found that in line with the scrutiny first principle, committees' comments and recommendations are being taken into consideration by officers in their reports to the board. However, the audit report recommended that it would be helpful for these comments and recommendations to be referenced in the report itself, and as well as the officers' considerations. So taking on board the audit report recommendation, a piece of work has been done to seek views from senior managers, and this was taken to the senior managers team meeting, where officers did acknowledge that committee comments and could be clearly more referenced and identified in the report, and they have suggested that the committee report template be amended to include a separate paragraph for these comments and recommendations to be referenced. So, Chair, that concludes sort of the salient points from the report, and the recommendations for the committee are set out at paragraph 2. But I would like to read out the first recommendation, which is for the committee to consider the further progress of the review of the scrutiny functions. But if our members are minded to, members can also consider if they require any additional time to discuss the questionnaire responses at future consultation meetings or after, with an option of adding any additional questions should they wish on attendance at meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Manjit. Are there any questions about the contents of the paper at all?
Chair, well, I have some comments. Is this what you...
I just wanted to check that everything was clear first, and then we can go to comments. Okay, I think it's fairly clear. Okay,
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. I'll go through a number of observations on the paper. I'm glad we were able to discuss this and hope we can resolve the issues it presents as soon as possible. Paragraph 4.1 refers to a recommendation by, it says, the committee on the 7th of July, but it wasn't in fact the committee because this wasn't a meeting. This was simply an informal gathering of the members of Transport for the North Scrutiny. So this is important because you have to be extremely precise in the terminology used. I'm a little concerned about that. Paragraph 4.4 states that members will note that the responses to question C, this is about face-to-face meetings. We're unanimous in disagreeing that the Scrutiny Committee should hold all its meetings physically as face-to-face. Well, I mean, that's fair enough, but it's explained, the consequences of not doing that have been explained. I'm quite happy with some meetings being simply calls, but remember that we do have a duty to the public to actually meet regularly and legally. But it looks as if a hybrid solution would resolve that particular issue. Because one understands the many advantages of meeting online rather than in person. But in fact, we're not allowed to do it. So there's little point prevaricating about something we can't do. In terms of the options presented in 4.6, I may not have been listening carefully, but I can't see how, given what we just said, how 4.6.1 can be legal, whereby the AGM is the sole face-to-face meeting, unless the term virtually there actually means hybrid. And similarly, we have to, in cases of the other options, we have to make sure we're complying with the law. There's no reason why this committee, and indeed any body which wishes to, shouldn't lobby the government again about making it easier to hold more meetings online, but the reality is, at the moment, we couldn't. And finally, in 4.8, over the page from where it begins, there's the suggestion that it would be helpful if reports to the board, the TFN board, could include Scrutiny Committee comments. Have the board been asked for their opinion on that as well? Because I hope they would support that option. It's clearly some scrutiny members want to see happen, and I hope they'd welcome that. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I ask Manjit to answer those two questions, are there any other questions at all, or any other comments more?
So just to say, I mean, I was in a different meeting, different body yesterday, and virtually, and the chair was getting visibly sicker during the meeting, has now tested positive for COVID. Whether she would have turned up if it had been a real meeting, I don't know, but the idea that we're somehow safe now is nonsense.
Councillor Salter.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to comment just very briefly in support of, I suppose, what's been said. I think hybrid meetings sound like a very viable option, and it does seem that, you know, people should, if they cannot attend, should be able to comment and have involvement. But I agree, if what we've been told is true, that legally we have to go back to face-to-face, then so be it. And I think as people may remember from the previous meeting, I think that we should explore face-to-face where possible anyway, but I'd be interested in what the comments are on the legal position.
Councillor Amelia.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in and say about obviously having hybrid meetings, is that with those, obviously there'll be some people who will be able to come face to face, but obviously if we go into lockdowns or anything like that again, or there's people who are having to shield, or there's reasons for disability, I think it's important to have those reasonable adjustments there for some people as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Just to address some of the explicit questions that were asked to comment on in the report. 4.6.1, the option of having just the AGM as a face-to-face meeting, I wouldn't be supportive of, but the AGM plus one other as face-to-face with remaining meetings as hybrid. I think the term hybrid meetings is bandied around a lot as a solution. I've yet to be involved in one that's been a success, but maybe that's an issue that will resolve. More than happy for consultation calls to be held virtually, and more than happy for the face-to-face meetings to rotate between Manchester and Leeds.
Thank you. Manjeet, could you comment on the legality of virtual meetings, please, and perhaps any other questions that were raised?
Thank you, Chair. As the report provides, Chair, the legal position as with regard to quorum and voting at meetings is actually provided in the report. And the report at 4.6, I should point out, is just giving options to members to consider. And of course, members are most welcome to come back with alternative options if they wish. So the 4.6 is purely there to sort of maybe narrow down the questions and the options, but also to assist officers in preparation for future meetings in relation to that. With regard to the consultation call meeting, thank you, Councillor, for pointing that out. You are correct, that was a consultation call, not a committee meeting itself. But if there are any other questions, I'm quite happy to take them.
Thank you. I'll take the audit point first. Sorry, Councillor Sol.
I was sort of thinking to make a possible recommendation of a solution, but if there's more debate, then certainly.
There's a little bit more debate. I'd like to add a few extra bits, if I may. My understanding is that we can have virtual meetings. Let me go back. First thing was, I think we can probably all agree that we would like to see our work noted as the audit committee have mentioned, because otherwise we don't have an audit trail of how we are influencing with the scrutiny first. So I think we could all agree that one. Would that be? Am I getting any dissent? No, I don't think so. So that's one we can agree. Before we come back to the vexed situation of meetings, I had a couple of other discussion points I wanted to bring in. Earlier this week, it was not a face-to-face meeting, it was a virtual meeting with the new chief executive. He was very complimentary about the work of this committee and asked that perhaps he saw that this was on the agenda. The very first thing he said, that if we ever want him to come to these committee meetings, then he'd be very happy if we were to send him an invite. The second thing he was saying was, would we like to consider some themes? For example, we've brought to bear, we've influenced decarbonisation, we've influenced the freight debate, but he also reminded me that we also have the ability to call in experts. And I'm just thinking that if we can call in, say, an expert on freight, then possibly we can be helping the officers by getting an alternative viewpoint. The example he gave me on freight was, for example, there could be just gaps in the network. Rather than you having to redo the whole line, there might be gaps where you can do quick fixes, but it's the experts out there that know these things. Most of us here are not experts in trains and timetabling, although we do have some excellent skill around the table, both present and not present. So I just wanted to sort of widen out the debate about what we do with scrutiny in order to ensure that we are effective. Does anybody have any other thoughts about how we make scrutiny more effective, or are we happy as we are, or are there any other changes that anybody would like to put forward? Councillor Hughes.
Chair, yeah, I'm pleased to say that I did receive report on the reopening your railway initiative, the beaching lines, but we've yet to have a discussion on that as TFN Scrutiny. I feel we ought to, because, of course, I needn't remind you, there's a good deal of controversy around the levelling up agenda, and there are concerns that the lines which are proposed for reopening or are actually about to reopen, some which are in our region, have actually been chosen not because they're those which are most deserving of reopening, but for other reasons. So without wanting to embroil the committee in controversy, I think it would be very useful if we could have a look at some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I have an item that will be discussed under item 10 in its detail, but I do think that brings up some interesting items. If you would like to, Councillor Parish, if you'd just like to mention that.
Yes, Chair. I was rather surprised with him since the Manchester Rail Recovery Task Force did its work and came up with planned changes, which frankly sounded a bit nonsensical in some cases, and I understand didn't work. From Warrington's point of view, it was a terrible proposal, splitting the locals to Liverpool at Warrington, and I was rather surprised when TransPennine published their draft service for. Currently, we've got the Manchester Airport to Liverpool so-called express with Northern, and at some stage that's to be replaced with a TransPennine train. Currently, the Cleethorpes to the airport train would instead go from Piccadilly through Castlefield and Warrington to Liverpool. But the draft timetable missed out the stop at the new £20 million Warrington West Station, which on what was originally proposed would leave that new £20 million station with 2 trains an hour between Liverpool and Manchester, and no train at all to Manchester in the off-peak without a change at Warrington Central. So if you're talking about reopening lines, the first thing you need to do is find out what guarantees there are that any railway company will actually stop a train there. Because that's certainly been the case at Reston as well, with a new station on the East Coast Main Line in Scotland. Will that do for now, Chair, or is just an introduction to the topic?
No, that's really helpful. I mean, the points I want to make are that we should be perhaps scrutinising timetabling issues. I think I think within the scrutiny, I think there are some details that impact on people very much. I do have other issues. Although around that have been raised recently around fare prices, for example, and these are things that perhaps we need to cast our net over. Although I appreciate we do get a full timetable of things to discuss and cover, and I appreciate that there's a lot of time that's given up.
It was just that yesterday's meeting was with one of the bodies that funded the station, actually with indirectly government money anyway. The government itself has put in £8 million to the station one way or another. It's all public money. But intriguingly, that body is the LEP, and they'd got an award for best practice in working out the funding for the station. And so the LEP is saying, well, from our scrutiny point of view, we need to be sure that best value for this money includes a guarantee that there's going to be some trains at the station.
Yeah, a slight omission. Yes, sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yes, following on from what our colleague from Warrington has just said, residents of Cheshire East are bending the ears of councillors in Cheshire East about the lack of community services into Manchester Piccadilly. The big concern is there's a lot of lobbying from residents, like places in Knutsford, Macclesfield, Poynton. They want more services into Piccadilly Station. The problem is there's no capacity whatsoever. And what I can't understand is why we don't try some thinking outside the box, because some of the older members may remember the Staley Bridge shuttle from Stockport to Staley Bridge, which enabled people from Cheshire areas, instead of having to go into Manchester on the always crowded platforms 13 and 14, to go to Staley Bridge and get a train onto Huddersfield Leeds for the north east from there. Now, with a bit of thinking outside the box, if there's no capacity into Piccadilly, can we not have something like a Chester Stalybridge or a Macclesfield Stalybridge service where people who want to get into Manchester can change at Stockport, which is a very good changing station, and likewise people who want to go to Huddersfield, Leeds and further in the northeast, instead of having to go onto the overcrowded platforms 13 and 14 at Piccadilly, they can change into the Chester or Macclesfield Stalybridge service and go and arrive in Huddersfield, Leeds, North East quicker. Because with late running, platforms 13 and 14 at Piccadilly are an accident waiting to happen. I'm amazed that health, that there haven't been concerns expressed by health and safety on that, but we've got away with it so far. So is it possible to try and find ways of extra services from places like Knutsford, Macclesfield, Poynton, but using a new service, reintroducing the Stalybridge shuttle and using Stockport as an interchange station?
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I take your point, though I'm not trying to debate whether what we actually do. It's the principle of us calling experts and perhaps doing a task and finish approach to certain things like the issue you raised there. And that's a very good example in my mind, which is why I think this is something we perhaps ought to consider exploring as we mature as a committee and as part of TFN, as it hopefully grows up and actually gets to be an equal partner with effectively the new British Rail, and we hope that we get transport for the North really effective. Are there any other questions at all? Comments? Sorry, Manisha.
I just echo what you have said about the timetables and fares, but I think punctuality and reliability is the more important thing as well, which we are struggling at the moment.
Thank you.
As I understand it, Manchester Airport made their response to the task force as well, because they would lose through trains to the airport, and of course part of the planning conditions for the airport were more people travelling on public transport to the airport. As I understand it, they would lose direct services to several places, not just in the northwest of Scotland as well. But if I've read their report correctly, they were saying that the disbenefits to users were at least as important to the actual performance of the trains. In other words, they were sounding like they'd rather put up with a few delays on trains rather than actually losing the through services. So we don't want to get into the argument of why things go wrong on the Castlefield corridor. But
Thank you, Councillor Parish.
That's what happened with me this morning. I missed 2 trains. I was there at the station 10 past, and they were saying, "Oh, it's not going to Piccadilly. It's just stopping before." So we need something like reliable.
Okay, so the issue is, and I'm going to bring it to a close here with 2 different things. One is, if we're all in agreement, then I would like us to consider task and finish and the calling of experts to this committee. Anybody disagree with that as a principle? And then, and now I'm going to grasp that thorny one of meetings. It's very rarely are our meetings decision making. So I believe that when our meetings are virtual, although they are described as a consultation call, I do not believe that they are against any of the, I don't believe it compromises any of the legal situation. So I would like Manjeet to perhaps clarify that, and then I'd like to go on to the debate as to how many meetings a year we might have in terms of face-to-face or virtual, or all face-to-face or all virtual, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you state, yes, the Scrutiny Committee function is one of scrutinising, making recommendations, and the comments on board papers going to the board, reports going to the board. So with regard to consultation calls, they are, as you say, opportunities for members to discuss and debate items that they want to take forward. So as far as the legal position is concerned, as there will be no decisions made at those consultation calls, then they are within the legal provisions. The legal point that we discussed earlier, of course, as I mentioned in the report, it's a report going to the board on the 29th of September with a view to making changes and amendments to the procedure rules, which will enable members to have a hybrid type of meeting and attend meetings by virtual means, but of course with the caveat that that cannot be counted towards a quorum, and members will not be able to vote if a vote is needed on those items. I hope that clarifies it, Chair.
It does indeed, and I just want to make a comment on the hybrid, because the IT guys have been chatting to me this morning and saying that, as Councillor Fenton mentioned, that hybrid meetings are very difficult at the moment, and the technology is not easy, and they've had to set up from scratch this morning. If we had our own studio, I'm not suggesting we do have our own studio, I'm not suggesting we spend that money yet, but it is difficult. So just on that, now I know that Councillor Salter wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, certainly my preference would be to go down the hybrid meeting route, but I appreciate that there are difficulties with it. But I do think that we ought to have the capacity to make decisions if needed at every meeting that we have. One thought would be, could we perhaps trial hybrid meetings? Could we do, say, the next couple of meetings as hybrid meetings and then review how that's functioning at that point? And I think whichever way we go down, it would be helpful to review the situation in 3 or 4 meetings and, say, is it working? And perhaps keep open the possibility that we might decide to go in one direction in this meeting, and yet, 2 or 3 meetings down the line, we can change course if it's not working for any reason.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. Just one moment, Councillor Hughes. There's a couple of things I'd like to add to this debate. When I set the agenda, if there's a decision item on there, then obviously I would be looking as to how we did that legally, and therefore it might be a need for a face-to-face meeting. The other thing, there's 2 other things I need to point out. We've got 6 people missing today, and yet during all the time that we've been having virtual meetings, the meetings have been much better attended. And we are missing 2 of our what I'd call rail experts today. So although that's not be all and end all, I do believe that virtual meetings do create a better attendance. The other thing is that many of you, I can't see that any of you are retired, and therefore you probably have day jobs. And for me, for one, I left home at 7 o'clock this morning. I'll get home about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I will not have worked today. I will not have been paid today. So I would just sort of caution that as well. But it's actually the lost time that's the issue. So I had an alternative meeting today, but came here. So I do think we also need to think about people's time and the return on that time investment.
Can I come back on that?
Can I just get Councillor Hughes in first?
Yeah, I'm happy if Councillor Salter wants to respond to that immediate point.
Yeah, let's see. So 2 points. So one is, I agree, it is a shame not to have some of our councillors able to speak today, albeit I think that is the point, surely, of trialling hybrid meetings, that we don't lose that value, but we also have the benefit of being able to speak to officers and experts face to face. And I mean, I do fully understand the time concerns, and it is incredibly frustrating, but I would say, when we become councillors, that is the trade-off, that there is a cost to our time and the things that we're doing, and potentially to the money that we're earning and such forth. But the point is that that's the commitment that we make to public service. And if there is value, and I believe that there's value to face-to-face meetings, if we will get more out of grilling officers and experts face-to-face, then I think we ought to be prepared to make that sacrifice.
Well, Champ, I'm really pleased I'll allow Councillor Todd to come back because I wholeheartedly endorse that final point. There's nothing like being able to speak to somebody face-to-face to really to pick up the mood of the meeting and to get a really helpful interaction. Not to say that online meetings are not helpful. I think we all agree that. So I was thoroughly content with everything that Manjeet said in her second most recent statement there. But if this committee wishes to shadow the board in the sense that it meets regularly in advance of a board to pre-scrutinise, as we've agreed we want to do, then we mustn't reduce the number of face-to-face or hybrid meetings, if that's the option that we take up. So any consultation call meetings, useful as they can be, should be additional to this existing cycle of meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Fleck.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, first of all, since I'm reserved and may not be attending many meetings anyway, I will be abstaining when it comes to this vote. But for information, in Cheshire East, because we're a large unitary authority, we have to have face-to-face meetings to make decisions, which means in the main we're meeting at very large halls, including a very large leisure centre when it's a full council meeting. But officers do not necessarily have to attend, they only give advice. So what's been happening at the meetings is the councillors and some officers have been at the meetings and some officers have appearing on the screen. So you might say it's a type of hybrid, but the councillors that make the decisions are in the hall. The problem is, at a meeting, corporate committee meeting on Tuesday, we couldn't hear what the officers were saying. The officers were appearing on the screen and we couldn't understand them. We were asking advice and we couldn't understand what was being said. So I'm just, obviously you may wish to try this as we go forward, but we do have to be wary that, that on occasions when someone who's attending a hybrid meeting, whether it's bandwidth or just poor reception, you may not be able to hear them clearly or they could even vanish off the screen altogether.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fletcher. So in terms of we're looking at recommendations here. So we had 4 recommendations in front of us. So I'd like to just wind this item up and just find out who would favour the items here. As Councillor Hughes points out, roughly speaking, we have 6 meetings a year that shadow. I personally am in favour of virtual meetings. Although I would like to have the occasional face-to-face meeting. Today is very useful, but I don't think I personally don't believe we need a full face-to-face meetings all the time. I think it can be done virtually and I think it can be done very effectively. And I say I am concerned at the loss of some members that are not here today. And if you go back and you track the attendance of the virtual meetings compared to these meetings, the face-to-face meetings, you will find there is a difference. However, having said all that, there are 4 different proposals in front of us, and I want to get a flavour of what the meeting would prefer. So perhaps even though it's not a vote as such, we can make it a show of hands. However, I think I have 2 questions. So Councillor Amelia, please.
Yeah, obviously I'm new to the committee, so I'm not used to what the makeup's normally like. I'm just curious, you know the members that are not present, has there been a difference between who's been present at face-to-face meetings and who's been there at the virtual ones? Because I think there could be potential equality implications from it. So for example, obviously there's a lot of people here who are men, there's not many women. I don't have kids, but a lot of women will have like childcare responsibilities. So it's whether having the online means that it's more inclusive and accessible for different people.
Thank you for your point. To answer your question, I don't think there is a, I think this committee is predominantly male, and therefore that question doesn't arise. However, we should be inclusive for lots of different things. If, for example, somebody had a disability of some description, so it's a very good point.
I was wondering if I could make a proposal that we trial hybrid meetings and review that in 3 meetings' time. I don't know whether anyone would be prepared to second that.
Yeah, Chair, I'd be happy to second that. And I just want to emphatically make the point that a virtual virtual meeting in advance of a board meeting, i.e. paired with it, is not a meeting of TFN scrutiny. And therefore we can say what we like, but we're not fulfilling our public function if we do that. So I'm afraid that the responsibility is ours to make sure we act in the way we ought.
Councillor Hughes, I don't think you're accurate, but I will ask Manjeet to comment on that. We have just done this for over a year and beyond.
If I may, Chair, that we did that because we were not allowed to meet, or it was felt it was improper to meet in person. But the law has now shifted that entirely inversely, in that we are not allowed to meet wholly online. And Chair, I don't want to be knowingly breaking the law, and I think we have to be very clear about what we do. And if all meetings are held virtually without any face-to-face input, I do not think we are fulfilling our required role as a scrutiny committee.
Could you just comment on Councillor Hughes's point? I don't believe, I would like clarity on that. I do not believe the statement that was just made.
Chair, I think, as I said earlier, that the legal position is as set out in the report. And of course, we have to look at the remit and the function of each committee on its own as to exactly what the function of that committee is. If it is a decision-making committee, then of course the law is that there is a face-to-face requirement for those decisions to be made with members present and attendance at the meeting. But of course we're looking at a wider question, aren't we? We're also looking at scrutiny committee meetings, but we're also discussing consultation call meetings as well, as to what the committee would wish to discuss at those meetings. So it is, the legal position is, as it's made clear in the report, but I mean, based on the information that I have in the committee report, which the information given to members, no, we wouldn't be breaking the law if there were virtual meetings. But of course, with question on hybrid meetings, that is also subject to technology being available for members and for officers to take part in that meeting virtually. Thank you.
I think there's a bit of miscommunication here. I think the phrase consultation meeting is getting mixed up. I think that we are purely talking about our regular meetings. So I think, and Neil can correct me on this, but he's taken the fact that when this meeting is virtual, that is a consultation meeting. Is that your understanding of what a consultation meeting is?
Chair, that isn't my understanding. What a virtual meeting is, a consultation call is. Consultation call is, my understanding, is for members to discuss and debate items that may be coming before at scrutiny committee meetings, but it allows members to have that wider discussion, and that can be done virtually and or as a hybrid meeting.
Okay, so then I ask you the question, this meeting that we're holding now with a full agenda, is it legal to have this meeting virtual?
The issue, Chair, is that the existing regulations only allowed virtual meetings until the 7th of May, and the government is currently considering responses from around the country about how to progress that and maybe go back to virtual meetings, but we don't have that legally. The consultation calls that we're having at the moment are done under our constitution, where the chief exec delegates to the consultation call, can consider, goes to the chief exec and then is passed on to the board. So the consultation call, Councillor Hughes, is legal in itself, but it doesn't take the place of the actual scrutiny committee, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I think we have clarity on that.
Sorry, we've just been going round and round in circles. As far as I can tell from what's been said, it is clear that you cannot have full decision-making scrutiny meetings, as this meeting is. Legally, you cannot have that in a wholly online format. And I cannot understand why we've had answer after answer where that hasn't been said clearly when that seems to be the case. And it's prevaricating and talking consultation calls, that is a different sort of meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. I've been trying to get to the end of this. So our situation is currently, my understanding is governance have yet to put this to the board that we can conduct hybrid meetings. For clarification then, and I will just go to my legal right hand here, we must therefore have the next meeting face to face. Is that correct?
We can continue with the consultation calls, but they won't be meetings of the Scrutiny Committee in the purely legal sense. But we are waiting, and we've got to balance it what's happening with COVID, of course, that because the legislation had to expire on the 7th of May, that's caused this sort of gap right around the country.
Thank you.
You can have...
I can have a consultation. Okay,
Yes.
right. Thank you, Rosemary. Right, Councillor Parish.
Chair, I'm coming at it from an entirely different point of view. If we have a meeting that's not legally constituted because of the regulations no longer applying, we have to meet face to face. If we had such a consultative meeting and didn't actually make a decision but said at the end of it, this is what we think should happen, and we told the board, are they going to say, oh, thank you for that, but you weren't legally constituted, so we're going to take no notice of it? It's just a question of, you know, what legal status it has. The only people we make recommendations to is the full board. Is that...
I go back to the fact that it's actually under the Constitution, the Chief Exec is delegated to that consultation call. So it goes back through the Chief Executive to the board. So that is perfectly, in my opinion, as a solicitor, perfectly legal. But it's not a meeting of the Scrutiny Committee in the Local Government Act sense.
Okay, so now we've got something very clear. So we have a series of options on how we meet. Councillor.
Thanks. Obviously, do we know whether hybrid's going to be approved or not? Or is it?
Councillor Lindsay, Councillor Amelia, please, I'm going to finish now. I'm not going to take any more questions on this. I'm just going to take some indication, but you're absolutely...
Well, I was about to give an indication as well.
No, that's fine, because I'll answer your question, but I just really need to push this on. It's nearly lunchtime now, and we've not got very far. So, here's the situation. The situation is that we can have these meetings virtually, and in that case, it's described as a consultation call. Is that correct? And it's done under the auspices that the decision making is referred to the chief executive, who will then pass it on to the board. So that clarifies that situation. If we want to hold a face-to-face meeting, then that is a meeting where it does not have to come under that special legislation. And the third point is hybrid meetings. That particular piece of legislation has not gone through governance yet, and so when that and I presume it will go through. So when that does go through, I think that's a consideration. And finally, taking Councillor Lindsay's point, Councillor Amelia's point, that the hybrid technology is not perfected yet. So those are the options on the meeting. So the options on the meeting really are truly virtual or truly face-to-face right now. So I would like, if I may, Councillor Salter, if you just bear with me, I would like to get an indication from the people around the table, and maybe we'll just do it very simply. Everybody can just say what they think. I'm just going to go around the room one at a time. I think it'll be much quicker that way, as to what of the options that were put in front of us you would prefer to do for the next 12 months meetings. Thank you. So if I could start with Councillor Manisha Councillor, please. So.
Chairman, I've had a proposal that I've put forward and that's been seconded, and in terms of the hybrids, all that it would actually require is that we legally have a normal meeting and that we have the capacity for people who cannot attend for whatever reason to attend virtually and speak. Now, I appreciate until there's legislation in place, they may not be able to vote through that format, but you could still run hybrid meetings. And it ought to be considered. It's been proposed, it's been seconded, it ought to be on the table.
Thank you. Councillor, if you could give me your comments, please.
I'm happy either way, but I can understand why the people want to face. Like so many things are happening, people are feeling isolated, and when we come face to face, we can more socializing, we can more discuss openly what's going on, rather than like when we have got virtual meetings. It's perfectly fine if the meeting starts 9 o'clock, 8:30, you get up and get ready with a cup of tea and be there. But coming here, you need to make a special effort to catch a train or just walk. So if we can do 50-50, 3 online and 3 face to face. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, Chair, as I said earlier, I was going to abstain, but my personal view is there should be a minimum of 2 face-to-face meetings, at least a minimum, because to show that this committee is meeting face-to-face, I think that would count a lot with members of the public.
Thank you.
Yeah, I noted from before that the report is going to be on the 29th of September to enable hybrid. So that's only 20 days from now. So I'd rather go with going if Councillor Salter's suggestion, and then we can review it. And obviously with having the potential for hybrids, is that we're enabling people to have it face-to-face and virtual, so it can suit everyone.
I don't think I need to ask you, Councillor Salter. Councillor Foreman, welcome to your first meeting.
It could well be the last one. Could I ask a question first? Are the public allowed in this meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got to meet face to face, because isn't it the simple rule that if public are allowed in, you've got to meet face to face. So as far as
they can be allowed into a virtual meeting as well.
Not if they haven't got the equipment. Yeah. If they haven't got the equipment, they can't. But if they're allowed to sit here, we have to meet. And that's the simple rule of thumb that we use up at South Tyneside. I mean, I've sat here amazed with all of the way we went round, and we've just come to a simple ask for decision. And for me, I would prefer to meet face to face, as in prior to the board meeting, so that we can get our points across, our recommendations across, and so forth and so on. And if it's necessary to have virtual meetings, as has been said, have the virtual meetings as and when, and use them as a consultation exercise prior to a face-to-face meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I support the AGM being held face-to-face, which is one of our 6 meetings, isn't it? And I'd support one other meeting being held face-to-face, so I would go for a 2 to 4 ratio myself. And for me, it's about work-life balance. It's about the ability to attend other meetings. It's about access to the meeting for people who have caring considerations or disabilities. It's about being able to spend more time in my ward and less time on the train and attending meetings. I would be happy with the rotation between Manchester and Leeds as well. Oh, and if subject to approval of the board of hybrid meetings, I'd be happy if the face-to-face meeting was a hybrid meeting, if we want to trial that.
Councillor Parish.
In terms of equality, I think the people who would rather have virtual meetings all the time are probably those who come furthest from Cumbrian Coast or Northumbria. And if you have all hybrid meetings, the cost of face-to-face meetings is probably much the same, hire a room and everything else. Certainly don't want to make decisions on the basis of the remote possibility of members of the public turning up to watch our proceedings live. So my personal preference would just be the AGM, but quite happy to go along with 2 out of the 4 being real. That's it, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I support Manisha's suggestion that we have one physical meeting and that the next meeting be virtual and the next meeting be physical and so on.
So I can.
I'm not a councillor.
Thank you. I think this committee does very good work in terms of making observations and recommendations that feed into the work of the board. We can do that just as effectively in a consultation call as we can face-to-face or in hybrid. I take the point that often discussions are more dynamic and there's better interaction when we are face-to-face, but I think in the current period of uncertainty, having the AGM and one other meeting face-to-face with the others as consultation calls, I think is a sensible step. When we have more clarity around what is permitted by way of hybrid meetings, then we can, we may want to categorise those virtual consultation calls as hybrid meetings, and we can be agile and we can respond to changes in what legislation permits, and also the dynamic COVID situation, which some people seem to have forgotten about, but which we mustn't forget about.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fenton. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, I hear what's been said, but we've also seen something of the moral dilemma that having too many meetings online creates. And my colleague from the North East highlighted that certain members of the public may want to be involved but simply don't have the technology. So you have to consider that. So my choice is I'm happy to, if we have live meetings, happy to alternate between Leeds and Manchester. I think we should continue shadowing the board in the way that the Scrutiny Committee has already agreed to do, and that those meetings should be face-to-face, but that if they can be held in a hybrid fashion, that would, for me, be the ideal solution, as long as we get the technology right. And I'm not at all against consultation calls being held. There, as many members have said, they're advantageous. They should not replace the designated Scrutiny Committee meetings.
Thank you. I'd like to invite everybody to go to lunch now while Manjeet totals up the numbers, and we'll deal with, I'll round up everything that we've said, or I'll ask Manjeet to round up everything we've said at the start of the second half, and then we must crack on into the meat of the day. But thank you very much for your clear views. Thank you.